The Philadelphia 76ers still have plenty on eyes on who this big fish addition will be. However, they have a tougher decision to make regarding the bottom end of the roster and some players that may be worth bringing back a little more than people give them credit. And maybe at the core of this is KJ Martin. So we know KJ Martin came over to the Sixers last year as a part of that James Harden trade. He was far from a player who jumped off the page, and to be perfectly honest, it was not an ideal situation for him last year. That he is a young player, still just 23 years old, clearly on a win-now team, and did not get a ton of opportunity. And he's now a free agent, and the Sixers have a decision to make. But there is a little bit of cap kind of maneuvering that could into play regarding his contract. So we have this report from John Hollinger here. Shout out to Zach Chavalello for the bump and retweet on the exact quote. He says, quote, Martin only has a $2.1 million cap hold, and the Sixers have full bird rights on him. Thus, it wouldn't be shocking to see Philadelphia use up the other projected $59 million in its cap room on other players and then retain Martin on a new deal. So essentially what that means, the bare bones of this, with the cap holds, and to pull up exactly what we're talking about here, you can see up top we have the active Sixers roster, which is just Joel Embiid, Paul Reed on the non-guaranteed, Jeff Doughton on the team option, Ricky Council on a non-guaranteed, and then the cap holds below are all their current free agents. So that cap hit number is the assigned value that is assessed to them if the Sixers want to keep those bird rights. So there are players that they will clearly take that cap hit, and I'll use Tyrese Maxey as an example, who has a $13 million cap hit here. The Sixers will hold on to that cap hold number. He will count as $13 million against the salary cap, and then at the end of the offseason, after they do bring in free agents to feed into that entire number, you can re-sign him above what that value is, and it does not cost you in the salary cap department there. KJ Martin is also could be a player that comes into play with this same factor. Just over a $2 million cap hit. You can see him all the way at the bottom there. I don't think KJ Martin is this guy who's going to be breaking the bank on an extension, but what he is a guy that I would be cool with having around, and I honestly really respected the way that he played himself into an actual role from what the expectations are. He's a unique player. He's essentially a small ball power forward. I thought he was really impressive out of the short role last year. He's an energy guy, high athleticism, still just 23 years old, and by the way, has a pretty strong pedigree. That if you want to dive into his recruiting records, just a couple years ago, listed at 6'6" as a power forward. He was the 68th ranked recruit in the country, a 4-star prospect, the 12th ranked power forward, and 9th in the state of Florida. I will say, as a little bit of an aside here, I don't think KJ Martin went through the exact proper route for him specifically. I think oftentimes, and this happens a lot for sons of NBA players, which of course Kenyon Martin Sr. is his father here, I think they get on a little more accelerated path and may necessarily be the place for him. Bronny James is Exhibit A for a player who that is happening to in real time right now, who, if his name was Bronny Jones, we're not even remotely talking about him in the NBA draft right now, but of course we know who his father is. With KJ Martin, it wasn't quite on that scale, but I do think he was forced a little bit ahead of schedule, that he maybe did not get the proper developmental arc, that this was not a guy who went to college, that he went immediately playing in this prep league essentially to go to the NBA, and ultimately didn't look quite ready when he got there. Now, he's shown higher points of ability rather than on the Sixers. And to dive into his stats specifically, he showed something in his first couple years in Houston. And that third season in 22-23, before he was traded to the Clippers, averaging 12.7 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, still just shot 31.5% from the floor. The shooting does need to come a little bit away, although he did shoot 35.7% from beyond the arc the year prior. But doing all that in just 28 minutes of play is pretty intriguing there. And the thing that is the most intriguing from the Sixers' perspective here is they're in a position where they should not be sacrificing any form of young talent. That they, as they look to build up this team to a contender, need as many trade chips as you can get. And while KJ Martin is not a guy that I think will be the difference in making the championship or not, he could be the difference in making a trade or not. So if you can hold on to that $2 million cap hit and then have a feel for what type of price point that you need to add, because there's so much importance to being able to stack contracts to get a deal to go through, maybe it's worth it to have KJ Martin on like a $5 million deal, which could be appealing to other teams as we look ahead. When you think about how trades are currently being done, I'll use the Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey trade as an example. The Chicago Bulls looked at that as we want no part of bringing in draft picks. And that's the Sixers' largest selling point at this time, is they do have 4 potential first-rounders that they can flip in a deal, but the Bulls were not a team that was interested in that. Josh Giddey was a young player with a little bit of promise that they were able to talk themselves into. The Sixers have just lacked so many of those types of guys. I do very much feel that's a large driving reason why they went with Jared McCain as a pick. And I've seen a lot of the pushback in the comments and even felt it real time about Dalton Connect being the pick. I think this went into the calculus with why they went with McCain over Connect. While Connect is the more win now player, Connect is a guy who is only right on the right team. For Jared McCain, it's a little bit more universal that he can play in just about every team. And frankly, the Sixers are probably closer to the bottom for teams that he's a good fit for. But there's still characteristics that I think he will be able to carve out a niche and a role for himself because of. I think they look at it in that regard. And I think KJ Martin should be viewed in a little bit similar light. That no, he's not going to be a guy that teams are absolutely rushing for. And if they are, they can go out and make him an offer right now and sign him in free agency if the Sixers are not feeling that too much. But I do think that there is a world where KJ Martin liked playing for Nick Nurse. Nurse seemed to believe in him the more that the season did go on and spoke really highly about him towards the tail end of the year. I think there's a world where he carves out his lane a little more clearly this year, where he can be a positive rotation player and could potentially come into play in a trade for the future. So I'm not saying KJ Martin is the difference between any sort of defining quality for the Sixers team. But when you look at what this current team is constructed of right there at the top with that active roster, there's not a lot there. Are you confident that we can come up with 11 players that are better than KJ Martin in free agency without putting ourselves in a difficult salary cap situation? I'm not, which is what makes me lean towards just bring KJ Martin back, bring a little bit of continuity, keep that level of athleticism around, and at the worst, there will be a couple highlight dunks that we get to see from Martin in garbage time this year. And frankly, I'm a little more optimistic that we get more value than that. I get KJ Martin isn't a guy that maybe is what it was hoped for in that trade. I do think that there was some hope in Daryl Morey that we could see a guy who could grow into a legitimate prospect or a guy that could contribute. I don't know if I necessarily see that as the case from here on out, but I do think in other situations it could be. He's a unique athlete, a guy that I think without a true center like Joel Embiid could be far more effective, but maybe he eventually finds that spot. That again, he's just 23, still has a far ways to go, and I do hope the best for KJ. So maybe this could be helpful in getting him to that location as well. That, even if there's not that strong offer in free agency, maybe in a trade is the way that it gets there, and who knows? We'll see where things shake out from here, but my overall premise of this being that the Sixers are in a spot where they should not be sacrificing young talent, and I think you should be leaning into every possible cap trick that you can do, which KJ Martin is in. That you take the cap space, sign him for a little more, and put yourself in a spot where you do have a potential appealing player to dangle in front of teams as the deadline or as players come more available. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree with me, or are you sick of the KJ Martin experience? I will agree that I don't think he lived up quite to what was hoped last year, but he didn't get a ton of opportunity anyway. So I'm not too hard on him because of that. I do want to see what he could look like in year 2 with a little more familiarity and development with the Sixers team. And overall, we'll see what happens from there. But appreciate you guys for tuning in this video here. Once again, leave your thoughts in the comments on KJ Martin specifically and any trades you think he could be the difference in. Also, don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you have not already, and drop a like on this video to let me know you're listening. Appreciate each and every one of you. We are about to be off to the races with some far bigger news than just KJ Martin on this channel and with the Sixers team. So stay subscribed and stay posted for all of it, and I'll talk with you next time right here on Sixers Digest.